turnover in retail could be turned into an asset. If you think about the people that move through a retailer, so people that come, join, work for a while, there's a lot of knowledge that you build about these people that at the moment just gets lost. Some of them are working for you for a while, even just 3 weeks in the summer period or in the Christmas. Then they go, and let's do the traditional thing. They get a degree, and they get a degree in software engineering, and then you have a tech need, but you don't know their technical skills yet, and you can interview on those. You know how they behaved in store. You know how they interacted with their colleagues. You know all of that soft part that is really difficult to find out otherwise. And this information isn't well managed in organizations at all, in my experience. It's just lost.
Welcome to The Future of Less Work, the podcast that's piecing together the puzzle of the changing world of work, one conversation at a time. I'm Nirit Cohen, and today we're diving into the future of talent and workforce transformation in retail. Our guest is Giorgio Benassi, Global Talent Acquisition Director at Sephora, who previously spent nearly a decade at H&M, shaping talent strategies across different markets, including Hong Kong. Hey, Giorgio, welcome to The Future of Less Work.
Hey, Nirit. Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
I'm really curious about this part of the world here. So let me start with a question. If the future of work is a puzzle, what's the piece you're working on?
Well, the piece I'm working on is connected to the way you introduced the episode of today. I mean, I'm trying to figure out which elements that we've learned, which aspects that we've learned during COVID can be applied to retail and in which way. So what are sort of some of the underlying principles, psychological dimensions that could allow a retail space, if we can't offer hybrid opportunities because the work is physical, what else can we offer that goes in the direction of what people want?
So that's a wonderful place to start. I always argue that people confuse the way the world of work is changing with the mechanics of working from home or hybrid, right? As in, and they don't think about this in the context of maybe a different way of thinking of autonomy and flexibility that people want that doesn't necessarily have to be location tied. So you've been in this space for a really long time. Why don't you start with actually thinking about how do you see the changes in what talent wants and what retail needs, right? So what is changing in this last few years?
I mean, COVID has, of course, upheld a lot of the beliefs that we've had. But ultimately, what stays at the bottom of it is our human needs. And those have evolved, but they're fundamentally remaining stable. We have just built probably, I would say, a different type of awareness to where we are and where we want to be as human beings. If I look at retail specifically, it used to be, in many ways, for some people, it has always been a career. For other people, it has been a filler role, some way of making money while you're studying, while you're doing something else. What happened during COVID, when people that were choosing that career or that filler found themselves in the inability to work, all of a sudden they found themselves with opportunities and time in their hands to look into different ways of getting that extra income. I'm ways.
So glad you're saying that. What you're basically saying is, right, a lot of times we don't go fulfill dreams or ask ourselves tough questions about our careers because it's too risky to rock the boat, or you have to make money, or, you're just on a path. And COVID basically created this vacuum, right? You couldn't look for a job. And so people sat at home and they said, well, what else can I do? Or what did I always want to learn or try that I couldn't do? How do you see that playing out post-COVID in the access you have to the talent that you want?
A lot less people these days are interested in a retail career. I mean, the application rates have dwindled. There's been a lot of layoffs during COVID. Post COVID, there hasn't been such a strong recovery, and in general, the interest is lower. And I would argue the interest in retail is lower because people can foresee multiple different options for themselves. Maybe they're gonna, I don't know, have that eBay store that they've been thinking about, or whatever other initiative that makes the money that they
So
want.
do you know, I've actually been looking at this for quite some time, understanding the people that used to do jobs that are not, that you don't do as careers, but more like filler jobs or because you have no other option, right? And suddenly even the gig economy came and you can build a flexible career by working in gigs, for example. Do you see that? Do you understand what your competition is for talent?
I mean, the market is so fragmented that having the pretense to understand the competition to that level is, it probably would be too much. But there is an analysis that I have been doing and reflections that I've been doing around, how do we still attract, because we still need to, fill our stores and make sure that there's good people in the stores. And one of the reflections that I wanted to discuss with you is that some of those alternative roles aren't necessarily everything that anyone has ever desired. There's a lot of things that we want to do, we never have time to do, we don't dare to do, and then we do them and we realize, oh, it actually isn't so much for me, or that's a great project in theory, but it's not something I necessarily want to pursue as a career. Or, oh, it's great, I'm making good money, but I'm very lonely. Like, I am in my space all the time. We always know what we want to move away from. Not always we know what, when we go on the other side, whether we like what we find.
Yeah. And I think you're also starting to mark. So what are the benefits that I have to offer for people who want a certain type of, job that are valuable, right? Potentially, as opposed to, for example, building flexibility through gigs, right? Which means you keep needing to find your next job, or, you don't quite know what you're doing tomorrow and you're all on your own.
Exactly. And I mean, I worked in the retail space for many years now in retail companies, and life in store, it's intense, but it's also a lot of fun. You're surrounded by a great team. Hopefully, not always, but hopefully you have a great team, good leaders. There's a team spirit. There's a common drive for results. It's usually a mixed group of people. Then it depends on the retails, but I've always worked with very inclusive retails. So you have a different mix of people that you interact with on a daily basis. If you crave human interaction, if you crave being part of a team, I think that's something that retail can offer you that other roles, some of those other roles we were discussing, might struggle. So there is a different positioning.
Yes.
Then if I look at our situation as Sephora, we are very lucky that our brand is very highly recognized. So we are still not in a phase where we are struggling to attract and find the right talent, because we're one of the most sought after retailers to be employed for.
So you're giving another layer, right? You said, okay, it's the who you work for, it's the environment. Also, if I have a brand, if I have a value proposition that brings people, they can relate. This is the environment they want to be associated with. That's definitely very helpful. I wonder if there's things that you think that we're doing differently in how we employ people in retail because of the need for people for different autonomy and flexibility, and the fact that they have alternatives that can give them that, even if we can't.
One of the underlying needs is still a need of flexibility. So people still want to be able to have agency in their own time. I can't give you agency on where you work, but I can explore how to give you agencies on other things. Your
Like what? Like
schedule,
how do you
like
do
your
that?
schedule, like
Okay.
how can you schedule yourself in? When do you work? When do you not work? There are some significant operational complexities from an employer perspective, but it's avenues that we have to be exploring to say, you want to work for us? Okay. What is the commitment that you want from us? What is the commitment that we want from you? We have been working and experimenting, for instance, with contracts that don't have any guaranteed hours. So, you are contracted with us. We have a framework agreement of how does it work when we work together, but we decide on a certain schedule and regularity when you work.
Does that also work for, I mean, I understand how that could work for the employer when they need like peak schedules, but does that also serve candidates who want maybe not a full-time job,
Yeah.
or not even potentially a full-time shift, right?
Yeah. On the shift dimension, it's everything can be explored in this context. I think as long as we can work with some form of anticipation, we can work with some form of flexibility around these things.
Yeah.
But other dimensions of flexibility could be related to location. I'm not saying we're doing this now, but it's things that we are exploring. You work in store A, but you're finding yourself in another location and you still want to work. You might be joining store B for 3 days, and then come back to that other store, or in the same city. It's much easier. You can direct people from one store to another with a higher degree of
So,
flexibility.
so I think, I mean, you're describing something which I think is really important to really underline, because we keep saying, um, you know, if you are location based, right, then the flexibility kind of thing that the COVID brought into the workspace isn't relevant for you. And I've been talking to a lot of these organizations, first of all, saying that it's not about whether you can have flexibility, but it's whether the people you're trying to hire can get flexibility in different ways. And I think we've established that the answer is yes. And so the next phase, and you've raised it really well, is that you can actually offer a lot of flexibility, because it's not about necessarily working from home, right? It's about agency on schedules, right? So do I have to work full time? Do I have a say, and maybe even more than a say, on when and where I work, right? How long's my shift, how many shifts I do, which shifts I take. In the past, we used to kind of say, this is what we do, take it or leave it, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you can do that anymore. People
No.
probably won't show up.
No. And it also has to be said that, working in retail is not necessarily for everybody. So, and, people might not then enjoy the degree of flexibility that working in retail can offer. So turnover rates in our space have increased after COVID. And for as much as Sephora in itself is doing relatively well in that space, it's inevitable. The industry is moving to
It's
a
well
higher
known in
turnover.
the industry.
Yeah.
I wonder if you have some understanding on why they've increased, because they've always been relatively high compared
Yeah.
to other industries.
They've always been relatively high. I mean, the nature of the work, and for the majority of the employers, the prospects for your future career are considered to be fairly limited. Now, I've worked with 2 employers that have made the progression from store to office roles a landmark. This is particularly true for H&M, a strong landmark of their talent management offering, especially in times of growth. But it's true that you can see it, that people tend to say, okay, I'm doing this for a while. Then then I get my degree and I go do something else.
And does that change how you hire? Because I actually think the idea that we enter a career with a particular employer and spend decades there, we might pretend it still exists, but it doesn't really.
No.
And I think it might actually be a valuable cultural perspective, knowing that people come in for a number of years, as long as it fits whatever it is they're doing. Maybe they're students, like you said, they finish, they graduate, they move on. And that allows you to give them what they need to bring them in the door, to keep them there as long as it works for both sides. But also it's okay to let them go.
Completely with you. I would even go a step further and say that if managed in the right way, turnover in retail could be turned into an asset. Now, this is, I think,
say more.
This we're going more towards the future dimension of work. But if you put, there's a few elements. First element is recruitment in general, and this has been my profession for 20 years. It's a guess game. Like you can minimize that the risk of that guess to a certain extent, but you're always taking a big gamble when you say yes or no to someone, because in the time you dedicate to any recruitment process, you never gather enough information, especially you don't gather the information that really matters around their potential, their ability to develop, their way they interact with other people. You can get a glimpse, but you don't really know.
Yeah, which probably the more the nature of the work and the organization assumes that there's a longer time until people ramp up and they want to keep them longer. I'm assuming they do more in this space, but I totally agree with you, especially with skills-based, that we don't know how to do that yet.
Exactly. If you think about the people that move through a retailer, so people that come, join, work for a while, there's a lot of knowledge that you build about these people that at the moment just gets lost. You use that little percentage of that individual that serves your need as a business. I'm teaching you how to sell beauty products. You do that. When you don't want to do that anymore, or when we don't want you to do that anymore, thank you very much. And if in the future you want to apply, you'll be treated like it.
Yes. So, okay. So how can we do this differently?
I think the skills dimension could come in and play a role. Now, I don't know of any organization, but more organizations than I do, that have gone through that journey of transitioning to skills and have completed that journey and are doing that exceptionally. But conceptually, I would say you can, in the process and in the time someone is employed with your organization, to start to capture, with their help, of course, not behind the scenes, but maybe with the support of technology. There's incredible skills inferring technologies that exist already today.
Yes.
Combine those and build a bigger picture of the people that have gone through your organization, and with the limitations, that's the privacy law.
So you're talking about building the skills profile of the person in general in the job market, basically.
Yes, but also staying connected with them, like having some form of a broader alumni pool, because these people, think about retail especially, these people are going to work for you for a while. Some of them are working for you for a while, even just 3 weeks in the summer period or in the Christmas. Then they go, and let's do the traditional thing. They get a degree, and they get a degree in software engineering, and then you have a tech need, but you don't know their technical skills yet, and you can interview on those. But you know how they behaved in store, how they interacted with their colleagues, all of that soft part that is really difficult to find out otherwise. And this information isn't well managed in organizations at all, in my experience.
You're putting your finger on, I think, one of the most important elements that I think we will see evolve. So I kind of call them on and off ramps, right? So historically, you bring somebody on, right? You manage them and their life cycle in the organization, and then they leave or you let them go. It doesn't matter. And that's kind of it. But because of the shorter cycles of people moving in and out of jobs, maybe that shouldn't be it, right? Maybe they left you because at this point in time, there's some ending to the combination of what I need and what you can give me. But maybe we can converge back. And I'm thinking if you need a software engineer, it's probably a lot easier to find, hire, and integrate somebody who knows you because they've worked in the store when they were students, right? And like you say, you already know them, at least some portions of them, right? Than to start from scratch. And plus it's a huge talent pool, right? So this idea of off and on ramps and staying in touch with alumni networks. And some of our organizations have actually started to do that. I wrote an article about this already. Yeah.
So this done at the scale of a large retailer, you have an alumni pool that becomes extremely large.
Yes.
And that you can tap into in different locations. Of course, there are challenges inevitably, and there's all the challenges related to the on and off of that ramp. It is costly today to replace an employee. So as an organization, if someone leaves and you need to replace them, you need to have access to talent. So there is an element of attractiveness and branding that you need to keep there. There's an efficiency in recruiting that you need to put in place. If it takes 3 people X amount of hours to find another sales advisor, it's a costly exercise.
These are all good reasons to actually create the off ramps and keep stay in touch with people. But you're not staying in touch with them to hire them to the roles that they left, but you might hire them to other roles, or through them, by the way, tap into other people.
Completely,
right?
Yes. But you need to make these processes efficient for the organization.
Absolutely.
So that it's the cost impact of having people leave and then rehire them later is minimized. Because as an organization looking for efficiency, the idea is, we keep them here forever.
But that's where it
doesn't always work, right?
More than that, I actually think that retail probably can turn this problem into an opportunity, because by understanding that people come in for a number of years and then they will leave, right? You might be able to focus on the things that are important in the longer term relationship and not waste time on the things that are not, right?
Yeah.
So, when you look at the evolution and where we came from and how people kind of changed expectations, and we already touched on some of the things that we might see going forward, what's your biggest prediction in terms of the future of work in retail? What do you think that maybe not future, like if you go, a year or 2 from now, what do you think are going to be the biggest challenges?
I think it would really depend on the brand of the retailers in question. And let me explain. If you have a strong brand value, a brand value that determines the markup that you can offer on your products, then you need to be really mindful and careful about the experience that you offer in store, and to make sure that the people that work for you in store represent that experience that you want to offer, that stay on brand. Retailers of that kind have the problem, to a certain extent, of not being able to transition in and out people with the same speed, because the operational costs to make sure people are offering the right level of customer experience are higher.
You can't hire. I mean, I've heard that phrase. I'm going to, I might be able to use it, but some people say we're just hiring anybody with a pulse, right? You can't hire anybody with a pulse if you need a certain.
Exactly. But the mindset shift there will be that if your brand value is indeed what generates the profit margins, then you have you need to find in that pocket of profit the possibility to create career opportunities for the people that you have in retail, and work conditions in general through that flexibility, but also through compensation structures that are different to make sure that people stay longer with you.
Yeah, or that you hire the right talent, right? I mean, and we talked about that. So yes, it could be, or it used to be, an operational nightmare to have people more agency on work locations and hours and shifts, etc. But if you want a leg up from your competitors and you want to hire, be able to choose your people, then you spend what you need to bring in those systems.
Yeah, exactly.
And they exist. They exist today already.
Yeah, they do. I think it's different if your brand doesn't carry so much value per se. And if the experience for your customers is not as important as a consequence, then there are degrees of flexibility that you can start to implement and efficiency that you can start to implement on the on and offboarding of people, especially on the onboard recruiting and onboarding of people.
Yeah, clearly.
I mean, you could go where the legislation allows it. You could go. I'm pushing it a little bit, but you can go all the way down to Uberizing the work in retail. When you have framework agreements and
like
you can go all the way
gigification,
down,
right? I mean, yeah, it's
scanning a QR code in a store and selecting on your app that you want to work 3 hours tomorrow, but you realize there's a shift now for 2 hours. I'll pick that. I go
and I've seen technologies or organizations that are looking at these things as well. So we sometimes say Uberizing, and we think about this in terms of it's not good for the people. But if we go back to, some people need the flexibility. They would love to come in and do like a 3-hour peak time shift that pays a little more because it's what you need and it works for them. And I really do think retail isn't maximizing its potential on the talent that would have worked for them, not in the regular standard full-time jobs.
Yeah, completely.
So wonderful vision for the future. Thank you. Thank you for that. So I always end with this question, and I'm really curious to hear your perspective on it. We always, we ask questions and we try to figure out the answers when we think about the future. What is the question you think we should all be asking ourselves about the future of work?
From my perspective, is that every time we try to solve for something in connection to the future of work, I think we should be asking ourselves, what is the human need at the bottom of it that we are solving for? If any of the things, none of the things that we can design, imagine, picture of the future will take hold if it doesn't answer a deeply rooted human need in the people we're solving it for. So when we talk about hybrid, what is the human need that we are trying to solve and trying to do, to work with the constraints that you have to find a solution that still solves that human need?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think you've demonstrated a lot of these examples in the conversation today, where we took an industry that is not the first one that pops to mind when you think future of work, and we actually talked about a lot of future or different than the past ways of thinking about employing talent. Wow. Thank you, Giorgio. This was really interesting conversation. I'm really curious if, we can talk in a year or two and see how that's evolved.
How far off we were. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I'm actually confident the humans we talked about and their needs, right, will drive the changes, even if organizations sometimes don't want to change.
Yes.
So thank you for
Brilliant.
joining us on The Future of Less Work, where we're piecing together the ever-changing puzzle of work, one conversation at a time. And remember, the new social contract has to be a win-win between people and organizations. Your best people do not work for you because they have to, because you tell them to, because you measure them on it. They work because they want to, because working for you is their way of achieving their purpose in life. Until next time.